I lived in Haven. Bless you. My code was a sprawling sandy beach, the beautiful creation, and that's I enjoyed and committed to the open source void. Then the swallow shadow came, and this big man came and commanded my music down and put my cocktail away. And you know what? The worst part of it? He didn't mention a word about leaving. I recognize that some of us think about CRA in that way. So hopefully today we are going to discuss more about how to not be scared about EU Cyber Resilience Act. And welcome to today's talk. I am Roman and I do security open source at Red Hat. How many of us are familiar with EU Cyber Resilience Act? And who's scared about that a little bit? Okay, I think almost all of us. So hopefully we'll explore some of the tips to help all of us to do better on that front. The disclaimer of this talk, as EU CRA actually is the most complex regulation that touches software and open source that I would bravely say humanity ever made in the entire history. That's why nothing in this presentation is legal advice, actually. Right? It's like a best take of the community efforts on what's going on and how we are going to go about it. If you want to learn more about Cyber Resilience Act here at Open Source Summit North America, you can attend my today's talk that will be focusing more on manufacturers and stewards. Rather, today's talk will be more for contributors and maintainers. And also, brilliant Dave Wheeler is giving the educational session. And also, tomorrow we have Open SSF Global Cyber Policy Working Group, which is actually open for everybody. Check out the timing, 2:30 on Wednesday. That will be in the level 3, room 710. It's a little bit downstairs, but I'm very much sure if you would like to, you can find the way out here. All right, let's still start with basics. What is CRA actually is? Cyber Resilience Act is EU regulation that's applicable to everybody who operates in European Union, and that's the trick because it's also applicable to software and to open source as well, and open source has no boundaries, right? So many of us, even indirectly, operates in the European Union. So EU Cyber Resilience Act will be applicable to a lot of us. That regulation aims to safeguard consumers and businesses by not using products with digital elements, so-called PDEs or PWD. They could be two variations of these acronyms. With the introduction of mandatory cybersecurity requirements, mostly for manufacturers throughout entire product lifecycle, and it's very important, its supply chain also, including all third parties and open source dependencies. And this nice picture is actually from the European Commission that they like to show off as an illustration. Now, continuing to a little bit basics, important role about important open source software roles that you can find in EU Cyber Resilience Act. To simplify it, tomorrow I will dive into all of this. Right now it's just the slide sneak peek. A manufacturer, one of the most important roles, it's actually those who produce product with digital elements. I will talk a little bit more about what that means from open source perspective. Importers and distributors who actually resells products, right, or distribute products. Open source software contributors or developers. Open source maintainers and open source software stewards. And the last one is actually a brand new role. I don't think previously there was a definition for open source stewards at all. If you could imagine foundations like Linux Foundation, Apache, or Python, or Eclipse, or others, there most likely will be stewards for open source projects. Now manufacturers will have most of applications, which is not really surprisingly, right? Importers and distributors will have some obligations, like ensure manufacturers done a great job in the nutshell with making sure their products are secure. Contributors entirely out of scope of CRA, which is a good news. Maintainers is a little bit different, and bear with me, I will be talking about this a little bit more. OSS stewards is an interesting role, and actually most of open source projects will not have a steward. That came as a surprise actually to many of us in the community, but that's the fact. Okay, then you can ask, you told me that open source contributors are out of scope, and actually with the latest actual present iteration of the CRA that is in force right now, that's been made significant progress to actually exclude open source at some degree from the regulation, not entirely, unfortunately, but largely this is an understanding that free and open source software, FOSS, is out of scope as per recital 18, right? You can see the quotes here on the free and open source software made available on the market, and those software that is used in the course of commercial activity is in the scope. No commercial activity out of scope, which is good. And also, this regulation doesn't apply to persons who contribute to open source software, like I mentioned, developers or contributors. They are entirely out of scope. It sounds good. We can conclude the presentation, right? Unfortunately, no. The devil in the details. Because what if you are a maintainer of a project that accidentally somebody else sells or uses in the course of commercial activity? What if you charge a small fee to cover your cost, or maybe some extra, right? Donations or beyond even. What if you provide some paid support services on top of it, or a processor collects privacy information, for example, beyond like reasonable minimum? What if you're, as an open source project, are developing the stuff like firewall, for example, software firewalls or hypervisor? That is our important class of the projects, right? What if you support infrastructure for free and open source software and charge money, for example, for it? And finally, what if a manufacturer or a steward or somebody else come to you as a maintainer of the project and say, hey, how you comply with CRA, even though you may be out of scope? Those are very important questions. That's why we are here to a little bit clarify how we can help each other. But I would start with this simple diagram. It could be a little bit small, but that's very important to understand. If you're a contributor to open source, don't be scared by CRA. But let's walk over this diagram from the left to right. If you're a contributor, again, to the project, and you're not maintainer of this project, go down by the arrow. CRA is not applicable to you, right? Then, if you're still a maintainer of the projects, but don't take money for anything at all, go down by the arrow, you're not affected. If you're a maintainer and accept donations that cover your actual cost of development or of hosting or something else, you are also not affected. If you're a maintainer and charge for anything else beyond the actual cost, like paid support or other examples that I just showed, CRA may be applicable to you, still maybe. Again, there is a lot of unclarity within the Act itself. That's why we are working on the standards and the implementation documents to clarify a little bit. But in the nutshell, that's what you should know as a contributor or as a maintainer. Now, why we care? As a Red Hat, you might ask, okay, why are you talking about all of that stuff? First of all, because we are a manufacturer, right? And overall, we are in the in the weird position here because Red Hat occupies almost all the roles that I showed under the CRA. We are a manufacturer because we provide open source, enterprise open source software solutions. We are potential open source steward because it's actually quite in our nature, right? At Red Hat as a company, we have a huge relationship and we're dependent on entirely dependent on the ecosystem, right? We support Linux kernel, Kubernetes, Fedora, and countless other projects. And also, of course, as the Red Hatters, we're contributors and maintainers of the enormous amount of open source projects. So that's why, yes, we care. And moreover, we committed to support the overall ecosystem and make it all a little bit simplified, non-scary, and meaningful for all of us. Now, you can ask a couple of good questions. Can a project be without a steward? Actually, I already answered, yes, of course. Is distributing binaries or container images of an open source project considered as making it available on the market? Those you have the obligations under CRA. Good question, right? And there is no like 100% clear answer. So if I monetize an open source project, what does it mean? I'm worried about CRA and considering completely shutting down my project. What should I know? First, you should know that please keep going and do not close your project, do not archive your project. As I mentioned before, so most likely you will be all right. Now, I'm happy to share that you're not alone on this journey, actually. All of us are asking these questions, right? You're not alone. Orc is here. And other creatures like crab. Why orc? Because as a community, we are working with Eclipse Foundation and their working group that we call Open Source Regulatory Compliance, or ORC. Such a cool name, right? This working group is focusing on the few important things. First of all, on the awareness and guidance, providing the FAQs and white papers, then on the inventory of the existing practices that can help open source projects, maintainers, and contributors to implement these good practices as they develop their projects. Also, this group is focusing on specifications and best practices, providing free and concise guidance. Free is a key here because most of the standards that are being developed right now as part of the implementation of CRA will be, unfortunately, behind the paywall, so they are not free. So that's very important to give the community opportunity to use something that is free and concise and actionable for open source maintainers. If you would like to join, this is a QR code, or Google us on the GitHub. If you want to grab some cool stickers after the talk, you can come to me and chat more about that and grab stickers. What exactly we do under Eclipse Foundation org working group? Just a few real examples. For example, this is the FAQ. I think this FAQ is widely referred by a lot of folks in the community and actually officials in the EU also referring to the FAQ is a good point with a good questions. The whole idea under this FAQ is actually to provide the best known answers to the questions that I shared a little bit earlier, and we apply the certain workflow to these questions. For example, first when we got these questions, we analyze this internally, and if we don't have an answer or we don't have a clear answer, then we have a chance to consult with the officials, for example, about it. And the beautiful thing about it, you can join, right? It's free. You can look in the repo. You can ask your question, like fill out the GitHub issue, for example, or explore the existing answers for the hottest questions around Cyber Resilience Act. Another example is we are working on the guidance, on the different guidances, and this is the draft of the coming soon vulnerability handling for project with digital elements. And I specifically highlighted that it currently has 132 lines. So this is basically like almost one-pager document, right? This is not like the standard within 500 pages, something like that. Very short, very concise, like a summary of the good practices and suggestions and recommendations, how open source projects can follow the good vulnerability management practices. Just one example of the outcome that we're aiming to produce to the entire ecosystem. Another example would be we are constantly working as the feedback loop to EU officials on the standards and other documents that they're seeking feedback for. A particular example on this slide is we are providing our comments on behalf of the open source community, specifically to solve some of the problems, like avoid placing unnecessary demands on the open source ecosystems. And the beautiful thing about it that these official bodies, they hear us because they don't necessarily understand how open source community works. And our mission is to channel this feedback and to give them their understanding, so that we are not ending up to doing weird things, right, as an open source project, as a community. What else we do to help all of us and all of you to handle Cyber Resilience Act? Work with these beautiful guys, all these goose, Global Cyber Policy Working Group under OpenSSF. If you want to grab these gooses, you can check out the booth. What this group is doing, amazing things around Cyber Resilience Act as well. Serial classification, clarifications, blog posts, even workshops, produces checklists and guidances. One of the, I think, most beautiful thing that came out of this group, and we are so proud to have a chance also to contribute to this free Cyber Resilience Act class that you can take and learn basics, which is cool, and as a bonus earn this nice badge, this nice Cradle badge. So check it out, it's completely free. And the one part I am probably most excited about working with this particular group is, and with entire OpenSSF, is tooling, the focus on tooling that will help projects to achieve CRA readiness and demonstrate compliance. Compliance, this is kind of quote-unquote because, as I mentioned, open source projects are largely out of scope, but the devil in the details. Because manufacturers and stewards and other consumers probably would come for open source projects and say, hey guys, how are you doing in terms of good security practices? And how you can demonstrate that you implement all of these good security practices. The demands for tooling for open source projects actually is very high. Of course, we're seeking for contributors. Please come and join us by QR code and the link. And as I mentioned, tomorrow we'll have the kind of open working group meeting here on site. A couple of examples how actually these tools can be helpful or will be helpful for achieving CRA compliance. Open Source Security Baseline is a very cool project that is under OpenSSF, and I think we have a couple of talks around OSPS, specifically here in Denver. I highly recommend you to check out. And also we have OpenSSF Community Day on Thursday. That also will have some talks about Baseline and other brilliant tools. Just in the nutshell, for those who are unfamiliar, Open Source Security Baseline, this is a set of the currently 56 requirements across 3 levels of maturity, covering 8 areas of security practices. But if you kind of have a look at these 8 security practices, they are not necessarily security, right? You can see documentation, for example, legal governance, build and release quality. And this is the beautiful nature of OSPS, because it is all about the good security, good practices in general, how to do development in the open source and making sure it's high quality. For example, to kind of simplify the message here, one of the practices or one of the controls there, when a new collaborator is added to open source project, the version control system must require manual permission assignments or restrict the collaborator permissions to the lower available privileges by default. That kind of makes sense, right? We probably don't want to allow just the random people come and immediately gain these high-level permissions. Okay, so this kind of common sense, I think. And OSPS security baseline level comprised of 3 levels. And the first level, level 1, is really basics for everyone, or you could also map it to sandbox level projects. Level 2 is when you kind of mature your projects and you have 2, 3, 4, 6 plus maintainers. Or at the incubating level, and the level 3 is for really mature projects. Also, those practices are really focused. There are no kind of should language there, right? Only must, which I really like, because there are no kind of room for a different interpretation. So if it's the practice, so you must do the certain things, right? Not like the usual standard may, might, should, so it's only must. And they are all realistic also, because they're kind of practical to implement and based on the experience of running and securing open source projects of the entire community, right? Which is a really cool thing. And the most important thing for today's talk is there are cross-reference to other frameworks. Often the case, we receive the question, hey, how it's different from other frameworks? Why I just don't go ahead and follow the existing standards like SSDF or WASP practices, NIST CSF, OSC ARI, OpenChain, or kind of SALSA or something else. These projects actually maps out all of the practices to existing standards, which is good. So you don't need to do the double work here. Now going to the particular examples, how open source baseline, open source security baseline can help with the CRA. A few examples here. Again, this is all work in progress. As I mentioned, CRA is a very complex beast, I would say, right? But the expectation is that, for example, if we have the control, the first line here, version control system must require multi-factor authentication, which is, again, makes sense, and that maps to CRA Annex 1, Part 1, Section 2D, which essentially about the making sure that the project or product is defended from unauthorized access by appropriate control mechanism, right? So again, kind of makes sense. And a couple of other examples that's already kind of mapped to CRA. Documentation must contain security context, for example. Or the third one, documentation must include a policy for coordinated vulnerability reporting, which is very important. I highlight specifically these examples because actually there are one of the most important things, most important controls that are imposed by CRA to products and subsequently to kind of projects at some degree. So all of these would give open source project so-called CRA conformity, right? Or making sure that the project implements the good practices that are aligned with the CRA requirements. Why it's important? Because CRA conformity for open source projects, even though you don't have obligations or might not have these obligations, that would then help with the due diligence requirements for manufacturers. Who are manufacturers? Those guys who actually consume your open source projects, right? And probably most of us do these open source projects and contributions in order them to be successful and to be widely adopted and widely consumed by by people, by companies, and those manufacturers, just because they have obligations of due diligence against all the dependencies they consume to their projects, they will need this understanding how all of the open source projects that they ingest are doing in terms of security. So that would be very helpful. Now, more security practices, and I'm going to bring one of the example. This is Keycloak. I think one of the most famous open source projects for identity and access management that's widely used across the even big organizations. Right, very great projects with high level of maturity. I brought up this example because if you have the good vision, you can zoom in and see that this project has the OpenSF scorecard badge, right, over there with a decent score of 9.3. That means this project implements a good open source security practices, which kind of cool. OpenSF Scorecard, this is another project hosted under OpenSSF, actually kind of cool project that contains some of the automated checks that you can implement against the open source project and then run it, for example, as a GitHub action and check periodically whether your project is implementing these practices. For example, whether or not you have dangerous workflows, whether or not you sign your releases, right, or do code reviews or other practices, which kind of cool. Another related security practices is actually OpenSF best practices badge, which is another good initiative. Basically, the assessment of how your projects do in terms of the security practices, so that you can log into the site, kind of enroll your project for this assessment, and then earn this badge so that to justify you implement the security practices. This all combined also would give you your project so-called CRA conformity, if I speak like official language. And this also would help others to verify that you're doing a good job in terms of security practices, and thus you are most likely conformant or compliant. I try to avoid the word compliant, right, because this is not the good word, but anyway. So that would help with CRA for both sides, for open source projects and maintainers, and for manufacturers as well. Now, you probably wanted to automate all of that stuff, and I would encourage you to look into other brilliant projects that are hosted under OpenSSF. For example, Minder. This is automated tool to actually roll out security controls over the different parts of your development lifecycle in the forms of kind of actions. For example, it has a lot of templates in the form of YAML files that you can use and automate. Another project that could help you is Trustification, which is another open source project and connects SBOMs, CVs, and advisories, security advisories that are issued by vendors in the one tool, in the one dashboard, so that you can search, you can combine, you can keep up, and you can focus on those CVs that are most important for your open source projects, for example. It's kind of, again, cool tool to make sure you implement these automation foils in order to meet some of the CRA requirements that are around vulnerability management. GUAC is another project under OpenSSF, also a cool tool that aims to collect information from different sources about SBOMs, OpenSF scorecards, DebStaff, which is a database for CVs, right? And combine it in the one single tool. Why I'm talking about this? Because all of these tools actually can help keep you can help to keep CRA conformity persistent for your project. It may be not enough just to do one-time checks or just to do one-time implementations of all of the good security practices, right? But making sure you do it on a constant basis and automate as much as possible. That would also be very helpful with Cyber Resilience Act. Now, another good project that I want to share with you called Security Insights Specification, which is very interesting project. It actually came well before Cyber Resilience Act. Idea behind this project is how can we show off that we do a good job in terms of security for open source projects, basically enumerating or listing all of these good practices that have been implemented in kind of both human readable and, most importantly, machine readable format. So this project came to play, Security Insights spec, and this YAML specification for this file, so that you can show or declare in the very explicit manner your security practices. And this is not only one project that is, can help you. It's a little bit small, but if you can see, for example, in this YAML file, right, this template, you can declare that yes, I apply SAST scanners, for example, or I enable dependabots in my project, or I perform threat model, or I do a lot of other things, and all of these are documented in the YAML file, so that consumers, right, they can consume this file and understand that you're doing the good job, again, in machine readable format. On the right-hand side, another initiative that is under OWASP, that's called OSS Sustainability Workstream. That is actually also a very good initiative because it is around like general sustainability for open source projects. But the part of it, the idea is also to make sure that we can explicitly mention something about CRA. For example, I need help with something, right? I am, as a maintainer of open source project, need help with CRA, or otherwise I declare that I do a good job in terms of CRA, or I don't care, or something else. So that's another specification that probably will become a standard at some point. Again, this is broader scope, OSS sustainability in general, and CRA, the kind of the part of the overall activity. Now, getting a little bit to the concrete example, how Security Insights can help CRA. This is key clock that I showed off, right? And for example, this is a Security Insights YAML. That's these brilliant guys I didn't show enough, and you can see they implement Snyk, they implement CodeSQL, for example. They do a lot of other great job, right? And again, post it in their repo as a YAML file so that everybody can have a look and can verify. That would mean declaration of CRA conformity. Tomorrow I will be talking about all of these abbreviations and official terms and diving deep into the compliance, but that would be a good point for open source projects to say, hey, actually this is the justification or evidence. Okay, that's we are conforming to CRA. Finally, another thing is automated as a compliance as code. Another brilliant project that is hosted under CNCF, actually that's called OSCAL Compass. It leverages NIST OSCAL framework or language as a standard data format for interchange basically between tools and people. This is very simplified diagram that is just sketched yesterday. It does a lot of brilliant things, but as an example, it takes spreadsheets, right, and put it into the machine-readable so-called OSCAL assessment plans, and then to policy templates, and then to OSCAL assessment rules. That's then could be rolled out as the remediation policy, for example, for OPAs, right, along the Kubernetes cluster. Kubernetes is an example here. To be more precise, right, for example, again, OSCAL assessment rules that are captured in the JSON file that then could be end up into the Kubernetes policy that then you can run and roll out over your nodes in the cluster, right? Kind of cool automation and how it also connects to CRA, just a few examples. For example, Article 10, essential cybersecurity requirements, you must document technical security measures, such as access control, data encryption, update mechanisms. How OSCAL Compass can help here? It can help create an OSCAL component definition for a project, right, to explain what it does and what controls it implements. Another example about technical documentation, maintain structured documentation to support compliance and audits, and that could be referred back to system security plan, which is part of overall OSCAL-enabled compliance process. So it could be helpful, and I believe it will be helpful as we automate it. Again, that also would give you evidence of CRA conformity that is verifiable and actionable and automated. Now, to conclude a little bit, why I still think the CRA is good, despite all the mess and all the things that are happening. When I talk with my colleagues in the open source security communities, this is kind of common understanding between all of us. CRA has a potential to make more for supply chain security and open source ecosystem health at scale in just a few years than we, as a lurking security experts within the developers, right, have been trying to make in decades. All of this Log4j and etc. Right now, we have a great momentum powered by CRA to make sure we finally can fix security for those projects that probably didn't look into it properly. So that's eventually a good thing for overall ecosystem. Takeaways. Do not stop contributing and supporting open source because of Cyber Resilience Act. Don't be scared out. Most likely you're not affected or you're not that affected. Take it as a call for improving quality and security posture, right? And nothing else, again, because compliance would be important for manufacturers, but not for you as a maintainers or contributors at that scale, at that level. Join community efforts. We need you. We need you, and we need more voices to implement Cyber Resilience Act. And a good example of it, how it evolves from the first draft to the actual publication that we have right now. Just because of the community voice and advocating for it, we have been able to make these significant improvements to largely put open source out of scope. So we need more voice. Join communities that I just showed earlier. And act now. It's all about good security practices. If you're following them, you most likely will be all right. Thank you very much for listening. Let's stay connected on LinkedIn or elsewhere. And yeah, thank you. I think we may have time for 1 or 2 questions and then go out for lunch.
I got a mic for you. I work for a silicon manufacturer, and this is all really great for software that we produce. I am interested in what you propose as entrances or how to get our corporate legal involved to sign off that these are sufficient or that we are meeting the needs of the CRA in general.
Yes, that's a good question. That's why the disclaimer was like, it's not a legal advice, unfortunately, and there are many opinions about the CRA and its applicability in general. I think at least you can point them out to these materials and to what communities actually thinks, justifying by, hey, actually these guys are hurt within the EU officials, right? And probably you can have a look at the materials that's available right now, so that it's additional like talking points or convincing points. Now to the hardware vendors, it's more complicated, but it's still doable. and join efforts. Specifically, this Eclipse RC working group, we have a lot of low-level and hardware and IoT vendors that are in the loop that could be helpful, and they are also struggling. So join us to learn more.
Just as a small addendum question, are there attorneys involved in these communities that are helping to vet things? Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Of course.
Thanks for your presentation. It was awesome. Can you talk about where the standards are in development? Because I think that might be helpful for context for your audience today, right? Because you have the CRA regulation that's published, but we know that there's going to be horizontal standards that articulate the specific types of controls that need to be implemented for each applicable area. So where are those standards at in development?
Yeah, the short answer, come to my talk tomorrow. That will be exactly about that. Standards, precise requirements and how I go about that. The longer answer is, yes, you're right. There are implementation standards that are developed to support Cyber Resilience Act. In the nutshell, they will be kind of horizontal standards that are applicable for everybody and vertical standards that are applicable for certain types of software and hardware, for example, operating systems or firewalls, and so on and so forth. They're all under development, and the whole point of the working within this working group that I would really encourage you to also join to contribute and to express your voice, to raise your concerns, is that we are working also with these standardization bodies to make sure that they're influenced by us, by open source community, and they don't do really weird things. And on the other hand, we are working on the simplifications so that we can give to the community back the simplified version of these official standards that could be too heavy even to read and then, of course, to implement by open source community. So that is all under development. We will see the first standards coming out next year. But yeah, good question. Thanks. All right. If there are no more questions, I have one question for you. Who are less scared about CRA now? Yay! So that's great. Thank you.